At this point, we hope that you are now deepening your knowledge about regulatory management system. An essential element for that to be established and institutionalized is regulatory impact assessment. In this module, we'll give you an overview on the following. First, the regulatory reporting cycle, meaning the process leading up to the conduct of RIA and its assessment, and the basic steps in the conduct of RIA.
As discussed, RIA is employed in other countries, and each process varies depending on the local setting. But they still follow a similar method of using qualitative and quantitative tools to arrive at evidence-based solutions. That means, no matter which country you're from, the goal of RIA remains the same. It is for government agencies to systematically examine different policy options and select the best solutions based on concrete facts.
Let's first take a look at the Philippine regulatory reporting cycle. To facilitate and implement the RIA process, ARTA has laid out 4 stages in the rulemaking process: pre-rule stage, proposed rule stage, interim rule stage, and final rule stage. In the pre-rule stage, as a good regulatory practice, agencies shall notify the authority of every formulation, modification, or repeal of regulations. This can be done through the submission of an annual regulatory plan every 4th quarter of the year. This allows agencies to thoroughly plan out its activities and for ARTA to organize its monitoring and assessment plans.
Following the submission of regulatory plans and notification forms, the agency shall now conduct a preliminary impact assessment, where the resulting document is the Preliminary Impact Statement, or PIS. The PIS presupposes a detailed analysis of the regulatory proposal, which will enable ARTA to assess whether a full RIA will be required in the assessment of a proposed regulation.
Next is the proposed rule stage. The agency should first clearly define the problem and objectives. You should answer the following questions. What is the issue or problem that may require action? What are the underlying drivers of the problem? Who is affected? In what ways? And to what extent? What will it be like without government action? What is the agency's concrete objective in taking policy action?
Once you have identified the policy problem, your agency should now identify policy options and alternatives. As a good regulatory practice, we recommend coming up with at least 3 options, which are derived from a spectrum of policy options and alternatives, which include non-regulatory approaches, mixed approach, and regulatory approach. Agencies may mix and match different policy tools from the spectrum of policy options and alternatives to better address specific issues to achieve your objectives. And once you have identified your policy problem and options, you will now file your advance notification and proceed to the conduct of the preliminary impact assessment.
If your regulation is deemed to have a significant impact, you will proceed to the conduct of a full-blown regulatory impact assessment. In the conduct of RIA, one of the main things you need to look is to quantify the costs and benefits of your policy options using qualitative and quantitative methods, which will be discussed in the later modules. By doing so, you can see which among your options is most likely to be effective and efficient in addressing your problem. The conduct of RIA also emphasizes the need for consultation. The agency conducts stakeholder consultations with women and men from business, civil society organizations, academe, marginalized groups, and other government agencies to solicit comments and reactions to the regulatory proposal. Information generated through such consultations may provide useful information in identifying the policy problem and possible options, as well as strengthen compliance should you proceed with government intervention. As an international best practice, a minimum period of 30 to 90 days is suggested for stakeholder consultations on the proposed option. It is also recommended to send out consultation materials to stakeholders at least 20 days in advance to provide them sufficient time to assess and form their inputs or comments prior to the scheduled consultation.
Once your agency has conducted your RIA and consultation, you will now prepare your Regulatory Impact Statement, or RIS, which is the 3rd phase or the interim rule stage in the reporting cycle. The RIS outlines your policy objectives, assessment of impacts, recommended option, result of consultation, implementation and enforcement plan, and post-implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. The authority will review your RIA submission and either endorse or return it for revisions depending on whether ARTA deems it as sufficient. Once your RIS has been endorsed, your agency may now opt to implement your regulation and proceed to the fourth stage, or the final rule stage. Once an agency decides to implement a regulation, the agency must notify ARTA of its decision in writing and/or through the PIBRIS.
To summarize, the reporting cycle has 4 phases you need to go through, which involves the filing of advanced notification and conduct of preliminary impact assessment, followed by the conduct of RIA, then the formulation of your RIS, and lastly, the implementation of your regulation. On the next video, we will discuss the analytical tools which will help strengthen your RIA with empirical data and systematic methods of analysis.